Lady Colin Campbell, what on earth is going on? Just weeks after you revealed to the world this close, shall we say, friendship that Prince Harry had developed with a certain young lady in Montecito, they claim to be packing their bags.
This whole situation is very interesting because once Meghan and those children are back in the United Kingdom, that means that the marital home is in the United Kingdom. That means that Harry is in a far stronger position in terms of any future place where, in the event of a permanent separation.
Oh, yes. They really hate each other now, and they cannot hide it anymore.
She was the villain.
How was she dangerous?
Because of the need for her to rehabilitate her image.
Harry was not in love with Meghan Markle.
He was madly in love. The veil is now...
Harry and Meghan were heading back to Britain that month. Moving vans booked, school places sorted. The entire operation was already moving. But on Thursday night, after 8 days of watching the calendar, Lady Colin Campbell finally said what everyone else had been dancing around. Harry wasn't coming home. According to her, he was running. Before we unpack exactly what Harry was supposedly running from, let's look at how America reacted to seeing him go. The New York Post splashed the story across its front page with a brutal farewell. Our long national nightmare is over. Harry and Meghan returning to the UK after failing to conquer the colonies. That wasn't exactly a tearful goodbye. The country Harry chose for his fresh start was practically roasting him on his way out the door.
He took Meghan and the kids, they came over privately to see the King a few weeks ago. When she said, I'll never set foot in this country again, and when she said the royal family is racist, and when she slagged off almost every bit of the institution, why does she still want her daughter and son to be a prince and princess then? Part of a racist institution.
Then, an American late-night comic went even harder. He joked they finally found a deportation that all Americans could agree on. That was the send-off. No emotional farewell tour, no heartfelt thank you notes, just a giant shrug and something closer to a street party. And back in Britain, absolutely nobody was bothering to soften the story either. Neil Sean appeared on American television and summed up their entire 6-year experiment with 2 savage words, broke and busted. Then Tom Bower stepped into the mess. After spending years studying the Sussexes, he described Harry as living in a fantasy world, even calling him a blunderer. Bower's prediction was even darker. The downfall of Harry and Meghan would become the real story. And according to him, this saga wasn't heading toward a glamorous comeback. It was moving in only one direction. 3, Angela Levin came out swinging, calling the whole situation horrendous, ruthless, and nothing short of war. In her telling, Harry and Meghan had been lying their way through the entire saga. Then, Robert Jobson gave this new chapter its own brutal nickname. First came Exit. Now, he said Britain was watching Rexit, and Jobson's explanation for why Harry would jump at even a small royal role was savage in its simplicity. He would take it, Jobson said. The reason was obvious. It beat selling jam. But some critics went even further, wanting neither of them back at all. After 6 years of Harry and Meghan attacking Britain, arguing over racism, and describing royal life as unbearable, the sheer nerve of returning was impossible to ignore. After all those headlines, interviews, and accusations, the moving vans were suddenly booked, and the same country they walked away from was about to become home again. Fool. So that was the room Harry and Meghan were walking straight into. Nobody was even arguing about whether they were coming anymore. The explosive question had become why, and that's where Lady Colin's version of events takes us somewhere much darker. According to her account, information started reaching her on August 12th, and she kept it quiet while more details came in. The final update supposedly arrived on the very morning she went on air. Then came the bombshell. Lady Colin said she'd been told that on August 11th, a meeting had taken place with federal authorities in America involving paperwork. Harry submitted around 2021 when entering the United States. Suddenly, the timing of this supposed British homecoming looked a whole lot more interesting.
information starting on the 12th of August, which I have kept stum about because I felt it was irresponsible of me to do anything in terms of revealing what was going on. Harry and Meghan, it's all cock and bull. They're not moving back to the United Kingdom because they want to.
Then, Lady Colin dropped the allegation that changed the entire mood. In her words, there was a strong belief by the feds that Harry lied on his paperwork. And then came the sentence that everything seemed to turn on. If they didn't jump, he'd be pushed because they couldn't risk the humiliation of an arrest. But Lady Colin didn't throw the story out the second she heard it. She sat on the information for 8 days, watching the dates line up before finally speaking publicly. She had a timeline. She had her sources. And she clearly believed something serious was happening behind the scenes. Still, the mystery remained. No documents appeared on camera, no officials stepped forward, and nobody was formally charged. All the audience had was Lady Colin's story and one seriously explosive question about whether Harry's sudden return to Britain was really a homecoming at all. 6. Now, let's look closely at Lady Colin's clock. Nothing happened on the 10th. First, a rumored meeting with federal agents on the 11th, followed by a family pact. By the 20th, the entire scandal was splashed across 2 national newspapers. 8 or 9 days, that was her official window. But one massive flaw in that timeline is simply impossible to ignore. During that exact broadcast, the host introduced Tom Sykes, who presented a completely different version of events. Sykes argued that Harry's sudden retreat to Britain was no impulse decision. He had actually been planning this move for months. According to Sykes, a close source revealed back in the spring that Harry was already house hunting. That is where things get incredibly messy. Months of meticulous planning for a British return and 8 days of desperate panic simply do not align. Either the prince began preparing this relocation long before any federal drama, or a sudden crisis kicked an existing plan into overdrive.
Happened that suddenly forced an old plan into overdrive.
You know, when you're writing a book, you're always having this struggle of what are you going to hold and what are you going to include. And I had a fairly lengthy chapter, which is now going to need to be rewritten, about how a friend of Harry's telling me that, you know, he was going to go house hunting, that he was looking, and that person said to me that he was looking in the Cotswolds near Highgrove, where, of course, he grew up, where he knows everybody, where he knows the pubs, where he knows the secret shortcuts and the footpaths and all those kinds of things, and still has a kind of network of people there.
So, which version is true? That is the mystery you and I must solve. Regardless of the rumored federal drama, 3 key figures closely analyzed the prince's sudden return that Thursday. A media host, a tax professional, and Harry's former security chief all weighed in. None of them believed the narrative being sold to the public. This glossy, official narrative still had the discount price tag sticking right off it, resembling a rushed PR package shoved into the spotlight before anyone could examine the fine print. Oddly enough, every lead pointed to the exact same place. Calendars, deadlines, and timing suddenly overshadowed all the sentimental talk of family reunions and homecomings. Let's look at the broadcaster first, because once his timeline was clear, this sudden return looked far from accidental.
Basically, you know, they can frame it any way they want, right, Ainsley? The bottom line is they're back, broke, and busted. It didn't work. The idea hasn't come along. And the really turning point that a lot of people should look at in this long-going narrative, and you do not believe that this only happened on Sunday. You do not organize schools and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. This has been going on for a long time, right? I mean, you know, as a mom, it's not easy, right? So this has been going on a long time.
The most brutal take of the day aired on Fox News, delivered in under 3 minutes by an insider who spent years studying this royal circus. Journalist Neil Sean had absolutely zero interest in sugarcoating the truth. They can spin it however they like, but Sean insisted the bottom line is they are broke and busted. It did not work. Then he did what nobody else dared to do. He highlighted the precise moment he believed the entire game shifted. In the Daily Mail case, Harry entered that courtroom drama expecting a total victory. According to Sean, that court victory was supposed to permanently solve their financial problems. A massive financial payout was expected to secure their lifestyle and fuel the California dream. But when that win slipped away, the entire strategy shifted overnight. That legal loss was not just an embarrassment. It was the final trigger. Their Hollywood venture was crumbling. The projected millions simply never arrived. Suddenly, returning to Britain seemed incredibly useful again.
The main point for this really happened with Associated News Limited. This was, of course, the big Daily Mail case that Harry believed he was going to win. This, he was told, was going to solve everything. He was the Dragon Slayer. He was going to have so much money. When that didn't work out, that was the final decision. What I can tell you first, though, Ainsley, is you will notice it's all about Harry returning back. Meghan remains very silent, and I've been told from an excellent source, rather, shall we say, concerned about not only a welcome over here in the United Kingdom, and I think that's a bit harsh, but you have to say everything she's done has actually turned to dust.
Now, look at this alongside the details Robert Jobson revealed on Thursday. The timing seems almost too convenient. The staggering legal fees from his courtroom loss, the actual invoice were reportedly scheduled to land the very next morning. So the grand homecoming narrative broke on Wednesday night, and the massive legal bill arrived on Friday. Convenient? Definitely. Spin the narrative before someone else's headlines destroy it. Just like that, the public is focused on his royal return instead of asking about his soaring debts. This timing is not a coincidence. It is a calculated PR campaign racing against a ticking clock. Meanwhile, let's look at the empire Harry is leaving behind. That very week, on Meghan's lifestyle website, customers could buy 2 candles and some matches for $128. Truly, nobody could script this better. A prince drowning in legal bills, a commercial brand peddling high-priced matches, and suddenly a British return is back on the table. The timeline itself was beginning to tell its own story.
A text from a friend of mine in Montecito, and I'm trying to cover the name, but he says, and we say bye-bye. And it's the headline of them. Everyone in Montecito is so happy to see them go, and these people are rich, honey. They are rich. Okay, not Meghan Markle, selling wickless candles. Bye-bye. Everybody's happy to see them go in Montecito.
I can't believe you're on text terms with Gwyneth Paltrow.
Mother Goop.
He warned that they are going to run out of money entirely in the very near future. By his estimation, their glittering Montecito lifestyle was no longer thriving. It was running on fumes. Then, biographer Robert Jobson targeted the issue that cut the deepest. He asserted they never made money through original concepts. Instead, they built their fortune by selling out the royal family. And that was the brutal twist. The very institution Harry and Meghan struggled to escape had also become the cash cow driving their biggest paydays. With those royal secrets drying up, their entire post-palace enterprise collapsed under its own weight. They ran out of ideas. They can no longer produce content for Netflix, Spotify, or any other major streaming platform, leaving their long-term financial future hanging by a thread. Ultimately, the entire situation boiled down to just 2 words: desperation and failure. 6 years, one single product. And that product was their own family. Now, the shelves were empty, leaving even Harry and Meghan's most loyal allies utterly confused. Throughout Thursday, confused fans struggled to understand why 2 people who spent years calling Britain a racist, cruel and unlivable country were suddenly so desperate to find a home there once again. Then, Daisy McAndrew delivered the exact line that the newspapers themselves likely never wanted printed. Champagne corks were popping all along Fleet Street. As she noted, their return would make a lot of other people rich. Everyone cashes in on them, except for the couple themselves. And that was the cruel, ironic twist of it all. A royal return meant endless new headlines, photographs, arguments, and internet traffic for everyone feeding off the media circus. Yet, people facing total bankruptcy do not typically wait for the perfect moment to escape. But Harry and Meghan waited, and it turned out they were not just waiting on money. They wanted a specific date, one that rewrote the entire narrative.
Entire story.
I was informed of this, and I would imagine, and I was actually also invited to approach people in the United Kingdom for them to raise questions to which would in fact assure the feds of having further backup as to the possibility and the feasibility of in fact arresting Harry and depriving, and I've been receiving lots of information about this starting on the 12th of August.
That Thursday, the most devastating critique of the couple did not come from a royal reporter chasing cheap palace gossip. Instead, it came from an accountant. Nay Shaw, chief executive of London tax firm Blick Rothenberg, was not analyzing crown grudges or family feuds. His entire world was taxes. When Shaw analyzed the timeline of this rumored homecoming, he chose one highly specific word, immaculate, and his full statement was even more revealing. He remarked that it was good to see Harry and Meghan reach 6 full tax years of non-United Kingdom residency to manage those complex capital gains rules. They clearly received brilliant financial advice, meaning the timing of their move back to the United Kingdom was absolutely flawless. That statement carried some serious weight. It was time to look past the emotional homecoming narrative for a moment. Suddenly, the entire calendar had a clear financial angle. 6 full tax years capped off by an immaculately timed return. It was more than enough to make observers scrutinize those dates all over again.
That someone else is coming up with it as well, because this friend of mine, who I think you've met him,
Yes, I have.
And
Good man.
He's a genius, and he made the point. They are free and clear they are not liable to tax on any of their American earnings for the previous 6 years. Say what you will, that's clever thinking. That's clever moving. And I mean, you can't really knock them for being so clever. I think in a funny sort of way, you have to admire them for being so clever.
Let us unpack this slowly, because this is where the timeline gets incredibly interesting. The United Kingdom tax laws were specifically designed to prevent wealthy citizens from fleeing abroad, pocketing millions, and returning home completely tax-free. If they return too quickly, the authorities will still demand their cut. However, if they stay away long enough, the entire equation shifts. The magic number in play was 6 full tax years. Keep that exact figure in mind. 6. That was when Harry and Meghan left. They departed in March 2020, just weeks before the United Kingdom tax year closed on April 5th. The clock was ticking. Fast forward through the years as the calendar marched on. This past April finally marked the end of that crucial 6th tax year. Suddenly, their sudden homecoming did not just look interesting. It seemed almost surgically planned. Under the temporary non-resident rule, if someone leaves the United Kingdom but returns within 5 years, they are treated as if they never left. But staying away for more than 5 years, which essentially means 6 full tax years, means they are completely in the clear. A close look at the Sussex timeline reveals they departed in March 2020, right before the tax year ended on April 5th. Surprise, surprise, they have been non-residents for the required 6 full tax years from 2020 to 2026, returning this August. If income was cleverly structured as shares, that money is now safely out of reach from HMRC's 24% capital gains tax. So as we can see, it makes perfect financial sense. Every single tax year was completed with not a month wasted. Then, in August 2026, Harry and Meghan supposedly landed back on British soil. Just a few months into the 7th year, almost 6 years to the month, suddenly, the calendar was no longer whispering, it was practically screaming. Lady Colin Campbell revealed she had reached a similar conclusion from a completely different direction. According to her, a friend with zero connection to the royal family texted her the night before, noticing the exact same curious timing. Her final verdict was sharper than any insult. Mostly because it was not an insult at all. It was almost admiration. She admitted, in a funny sort of way, that one cannot really blame them. Indeed, you almost have to admire how clever they were. That was the delicious twist. If this timing was calculated so carefully, then this was no rushed homecoming thrown together over breakfast. Instead, it was a highly strategic move made with one eye firmly fixed on the calendar. They seemingly understood that if they did not jump, they would be pushed. They simply could not risk the public embarrassment of a potential arrest. Now that he is no longer living in America, they likely hope the entire controversy will just quietly fade away. Lady C even had a special name for this pattern, a Meganian stunt. According to her, Meghan orchestrates a crisis, lets pressure build until the 99th hour, then pulls off a sudden move to escape the fallout. Here is what made this sharp accusation sting even more. None of these moves actually broke any official rules. It was all completely legal, routine, and accessible to any wealthy dynasty with clever accountants tracking the dates, which was precisely what the critics seized on. A son who just missed his dad could easily buy a ticket tomorrow. But in this telling, Harry waited for the tax calendar to click into the perfect spot before finally launching his massive move. Perhaps emotion had nothing to do with the schedule. Maybe the calendar dictated everything. And if the timing was truly that precise, the next question became far more interesting. What exactly did returning to the United Kingdom secure for them? All of a sudden, the situation got incredibly real. It turned into a massive, undeniable development that changed the entire game. A close look at the official court documents reveals how many times this security battle has been fought in legal halls. The reasons behind their lack of official protection are detailed in documents that are far from secret. Crucially, they lost their protection because they no longer fell within the specific category of citizens who receive automatic security. They did not belong to the elite group receiving taxpayer-funded protection. 6 years and a fortune spent on endless legal battles, yet Harry still could not secure the security deal he demanded. That was when journalist Tom Sykes analyzed the court records. According to him, the truth was not some dark palace mystery. Harry and Meghan simply did not fit into the select category of people who automatically qualify for top-tier security. One glaring detail Sykes pointed out was impossible to overlook. They no longer lived in the United Kingdom, but then Sykes revealed a twist returning to Britain could solve their biggest issue. If King Charles granted Harry even a minor official role with a charity, the entire security equation would instantly change. Under this scenario, Harry would not require a dramatic comeback to active royal duties. Even a minor role could reopen the debate on whether he deserved taxpayer-funded protection. Suddenly, the relocation was about much more than just family, taxes, or finances. It could thrust their high-stakes security battle right back into the spotlight as sources close to the couple began dropping strategic hints. Reports suggested that any talks regarding a future royal role would have to happen directly between Harry and his father. Essentially, they were dropping heavy hints that Harry was preparing to make a move. He would soon ask the king for a minor royal role, a calculated strategy that critics quickly spotted. With a British address and a minor charity role, they could tick 2 crucial boxes and potentially unlock taxpayer-funded protection. A private security bill of $3 million annually could suddenly vanish overnight, but the scheme went far deeper. The protection would not just cover a single house in Britain. The security team would follow Harry everywhere, from private holidays to business trips and all public outings. Thus, a seemingly minor royal role actually held an incredible hidden value. A small step back toward royal duties could quietly solve the couple's most expensive security issue in one single move. Critics called the situation absurd, viewing the entire scheme as nothing more than a calculated financial play. They wanted to dodge a $3 million security bill by securing taxpayer-funded protection. As a result, they would receive this elite protection even while living at their home in California, wiping out a massive $3 million annual bill. Robert Jobson suggested a much larger figure. He placed the potential savings at $4 million, then delivered a chilling line that left the entire room silent. Meghan might be excluded from the deal entirely. And if anyone doubted that the door was already being cracked open, they only needed to study Harry's carefully chosen words. Right at the beginning was a very clean promise. No public funds and no official royal duties. It sounded simple, but in this high-stakes game, every single word carried immense weight. Avoiding official duties did not rule out a minor charity role or a quiet future arrangement. This loophole made critics wonder if the door had ever really been shut. The door was left slightly ajar, and while the development was not entirely surprising, its rapid execution shocked many onlookers. The sheer speed with which everything unfolded left observers absolutely stunned by how quickly it happened. Then came the second line, allegedly leaked straight from Harry and Meghan's camp, and suddenly that locked door did not seem so shut anymore. Any future talks about a potential role would have to happen strictly between him and his father. There it was, plain as day. While the opening lines ruled out official duties, the next segment quietly carved out room for future talks, a clever loophole hidden in plain sight. Author Robert Jobson recognized this classic palace maneuver immediately, summarizing the entire situation with one brutal observation. The king gave Harry an inch, Jobson noted, and Harry took 50 yards. That exact anxiety loomed over this entire rumored return. Grant Harry one tiny opening, just one chat or modest role, and the boundaries everyone assumed were set in stone could instantly begin to blur. Insiders claim the monarch naturally welcomed any chance to connect with the Sussexes behind closed doors in a strictly private capacity. Yet the king remained absolutely firm that there would be no changes to their status as non-working royals, fully respecting the agreements they had mutually reached over the past several years. No half-in, half-out option existed. Many critics viewed this as a sign of royal weakness. A blunt truth the mainstream media carefully avoided saying. The statement pointed to agreements from years past, but the reality was simple. The Sussexes had completely changed their minds. They shifted course because the money had dried up. Yet, 6 years ago, Harry and Meghan claimed to be absolutely terrified for their safety. By last year, the warnings grew even darker. They spoke of acid attacks, knives, hostile press, depicting the nation as entirely too dangerous for their young children to visit. Yet now, as observers noted, everything was suddenly perfectly fine, safe enough to return, safe enough for the kids, and safe enough to rebuild their lives in the exact country they spent years calling a hazard. That was the glaring contradiction that nobody could ignore. If the threat had truly been so severe, what had changed so fast? Perhaps someone should have asked the former head of Harry's security detail, as he held a very different view on this sudden shift. The details spoke volumes on their own. Critics labeled the couple completely hypocritical and unrepentant, calling their sudden change of heart impossible to accept. They were viewed as incredibly difficult, arriving with an attitude focused solely on making things convenient for themselves. They would visit the king, spin the narrative, and profit from it, with Meghan drafting a new book and Harry cashing in. It seemed entirely calculated. When asked to speak on live television at midnight, the security expert actually refused the offer. He was not trying to shield the couple or the palace. He was simply too stunned by the news to speak. This was no ordinary commentator seeking attention. Dai Davies had spent years commanding the entire Royal Protection Unit. He was not a royal biographer peddling books or an outsider watching from afar. He had been directly responsible for protecting the monarchy, and his reaction was explosive. Davies expressed utter shock after 6 long years of Harry insisting that Britain was far too dangerous for his family. To him, this was a complete 100% U-turn, raising the obvious question of what was really happening behind the scenes. If the threat level had been so high, some massive shift must have occurred for them to return so abruptly. It truly was a massive development. This was a man who had walked away from his royal family and his home country, loudly declaring them terrible, insulting them openly, and suggesting he would never set foot there again. Then, Out of nowhere, just like that, following a few quick conversations with his father after 6 years away, he had suddenly decided exactly what his next move would be. The rush felt incredibly risky, raising serious questions about why everything had to happen in such a hurry. Next, Davies turned his focus directly to the palace. He argued that staff must have already been coordinating the logistics from housing and schools to the complex security arrangements required for such a move. When official reports claimed the palace was left entirely in the dark until Sunday, Davies offered a harsh response. It defied belief. Then came a chilling statistic. Davies revealed there were over 1,000 fixated individuals in the nation, with roughly 20% of them posing a genuine physical threat. 1,000. Recent polling also indicated that 85% of the public opposed their return. Yet Davies was not highlighting those figures merely to gauge public outrage from a safety standpoint. The real worry was what such intense public scrutiny might actually trigger. He warned of diverse potential threats, noting that every risk required careful evaluation following their sudden relocation. Suddenly, it transcended royal drama, money, and palace gossip. The entire security apparatus now had to brace for the unknown. Observers were equally stunned by the palace's bold claim that the king had no idea until Sunday. Critics quickly dismissed that story. To many, the notion that the monarch only learned about it on Sunday seemed completely absurd. Yet another crucial factor makes this entire situation incredibly difficult to fully grasp, especially given the chaos surrounding the British royal family over the last few years. In a strange twist, Harry and Meghan's steep unpopularity had actually become a critical security factor. Any added protection threatened to dump a massive bill onto ordinary citizens who never asked for this royal drama. Ultimately, the final decision would not rest with social media, newspaper polls, or loud commentators. Davies explained that the choice lay with a small, elite committee analyzing classified intelligence, assessing threats, and calculating actual risks. Then came the figure that truly shocked everyone. According to Davies, the final price tag could easily run into many millions. What seemed like a quiet family reunion could morph into a massive security operation, leaving taxpayers wondering who would pay the bill. Many royal watchers are intensely curious about how the couple intends to make a living now. Aside from book deals, earning a living in the United Kingdom seems tough, especially with round-the-clock security costing a fortune. They apparently are not selling their $15 million Montecito mansion. Naturally, skeptics are asking whether the royal family or the taxpayer will fund this, something Prince William likely would not tolerate. Davies made another critical point, shattering the illusion that these arrangements could happen overnight. Securing a residence requires massive technical support. He noted that protection goes far beyond stationing officers at a front gate. It demands meticulous planning, specialized equipment, intelligence, and a full-scale tactical operation. Meanwhile, the process stalled, and Daisy McAndrews suggested a reason most had overlooked. The official review was apparently bogged down by the high number of living former prime ministers demanding constant protection. At this point, the entire situation turned completely surreal. Despite stepping back from royal duties, Harry was essentially waiting in line behind retired world leaders who ran the country. The Home Secretary refused to budge, leaving Harry's official security status completely unchanged. While dramatic comeback headlines dominated the news, his security dilemma remained unresolved, exactly where he had left it. No one seemed ready to give him the answer he wanted, a reality confirmed by former prime ministers themselves. Indeed, whether traveling to the Maldives on vacation or flying to Israel on business, their security detail always tags along. Ultimately, if a person genuinely requires high-level protection, location simply does not matter. Davies reserved his sharpest criticism for those advising the couple. Their current advisors desperately need to rethink their structure and professionalism. He flatly called it nonsensical, delivering a direct blow to the entire operation currently surrounding them. Everything was questioned from the odd timing to how this potential return was being framed. Davies clearly sensed that something behind closed doors did not add up. That is the massive bill. Complex logistics, major safety concerns, and millions at stake. But now the narrative gets even more intriguing. This was the grand story sold to the public, explaining why they were supposedly returning home. We must remember that Harry and Meghan are highly skilled at crafting their own tailored narratives. It is worth remembering that William and Kate are not the only ones keeping their distance from the couple. Even the Queen wants distance. The King himself has preferred very limited contact, showing slightly more warmth to his son than his daughter-in-law. Yet, he has hardly embraced either of them recently. This was the exact story his team fed to reporters right before the narrative suddenly shifted. Hannah Furness, royal editor for the publication that broke the news, detailed the sheer drama of that sudden pivot. Just recently, she noted insiders close to him were insisting he had never been happier. He was learning to surf, loving life, and seemingly resolved to never look back at the past. They supposedly miss nothing about Britain. Surfing lessons, of all things. California was supposed to be paradise. Harry seemed happier than ever, leaving Britain far behind in his rearview mirror. Then, out of nowhere, the message shifted. Furness revealed that the very same camp had recently started briefing something entirely different. Suddenly, the prince who claimed he would never look back seemed incredibly interested in looking homeward once again. That dramatic pivot raised one massive question: what changed? The whole thing simply did not make any sense. Those two were incredibly popular, deeply loved figures. Just look at their high approval ratings. The British public was in no position to be won over when it came to Harry and Meghan. It was painfully clear that any attempt to push this would be a massive disaster. It threatened to deeply destabilize the entire British monarchy. It posed a massive threat to William and Catherine and could even create serious trouble for a future King George III. Angela Levin condensed the entire 6-year saga into one brutal, biting summary. Harry abandoned his family, branded them as toxic, publicly tore them to shreds, acted like all bridges were burned, and then suddenly, boom, Britain was suddenly back on the table. But Hannah Furness chose to take a much more cautious approach. Avoiding wild theories and attention-grabbing headlines, she made her next words strike even deeper. There may be financial things, she remarked. Perhaps there were visa issues, or maybe hidden factors that simply had not been part of the conversation yet. Then came the line that captured the sheer confusion of it all. Absolutely nothing about this made perfect sense. That was the core problem. The public narrative kept shifting, the timing raised doubts, and every single explanation left loose ends. Money, visas, family, security, or perhaps something absolutely nobody had even considered yet. Whatever truly triggered this sudden about-face, the puzzle pieces simply refused to fit together. Many onlookers certainly had strong feelings about the matter, watching how Harry had skillfully exploited King Charles's deep love for him. And the king truly does love his son, his darling boy, a vulnerability Harry successfully exploited. Ultimately, he drove a deep wedge directly between the king and the heir. By successfully separating Prince William from the king, Harry had maneuvered himself into a position where he could return home with his father's full blessing. Such a deep split at the very heart of the crown, with the king wanting one thing and his heir demanding another, was incredibly damaging. Those words came from the royal editor of the newspaper that broke the story. Essentially, she argued the explanation did not add up, refusing to buy the official timeline. She expressed deep skepticism that King Charles and his staff were completely blind to the move, especially since the pair had met for tea back in July. The idea that such a massive relocation was never mentioned during their meeting simply did not wash, as Furness put it. Soon after, journalist Tom Sykes dragged their controversial track record right back into the spotlight. This went far beyond someone merely having a suspicious feeling. According to Sykes, the palace press office had previously denied any involvement in a meeting that the Sussex camp had already leaked to reporters. Once again, two conflicting narratives were circulating. Someone clearly knew the truth behind the scenes, Leaks were slipping out, making the official royal story look shakier with every passing day. Many observers felt a deep sense of sympathy for the public, especially since they had been fed misleading statements time and again by the Sussex press office. Most notably, observers pointed to the blatant falsehoods spread last year regarding the meeting between Meredith Maines and Tobin Andre. Back then, the Sussex team vehemently denied any involvement, only for direct contradictions to surface later on. Critics had not forgotten prior incidents, like the rumored Kardashian agreement that supposedly existed but quickly vanished. Then there was the famous claim of a secret backyard wedding 3 days prior to the official ceremony, a story the Archbishop of Canterbury quickly debunked by pointing out the strict legal requirements of a real marriage ceremony. So, what narrative was the Sussex PR team spinning this time? Page 6 received the latest pitch. Harry and Meghan allegedly wanted to draw closer to the king, hoping their children could finally bond with their royal cousins. It sounded warm and perfectly reasonable, but Lady Colin Campbell needed barely 8 seconds to begin tearing it apart. After 6 long years of public feuds and shifting excuses, she utterly rejected this sudden, cozy portrait of family reconciliation. Just look at the uncles and aunts. She questioned exactly which family they were referring to, pointing out that Lord Spencer's children did not even speak to their father. They did not speak to their father at all, raising the obvious question, what family? Furthermore, those children were far too old to be playing happy families with Harry and Meghan's young offspring, making the entire narrative look completely fabricated. Where was the family, and which family did they even mean? Author Robert Jobson had done the math, and the final tally looked brutal. Just 3 meetings between Harry and his father in 6 years, while Charles supposedly saw his grandchildren only twice. Yet suddenly, those very children were framed as the emotional catalyst for this dramatic return. Jobson used a far more damaging word for this broken relationship, calling it treachery. He highlighted months of secret filming done right under the royals' noses, later sold as part of a highly lucrative media deal. Then Elsa Anderson, former press secretary to the late Queen, shut down the idea that July was some grand reunion. No photos, no emotional briefings, nothing but a dry confirmation that they met. They were testing the waters, she noted. Then that strange media pattern emerged yet again. 2 newspapers published the story within the exact same hour, and both claimed a world exclusive. In their world, that did not look like a pair of lucky scoops. Instead, it looked like someone had carefully fed them the information. The other side of the story is Meghan herself. The prevailing belief is that she will spend far more time at their holiday home in Portugal during the upcoming season. She is highly unlikely to base herself inside the gloomy, rain-soaked walls of a British estate during such miserable weather. It is not a lifestyle she would enjoy. But the bigger question remains, how will she fill her time? Especially since so many of her former British connections have completely withered. If we piece this together, Thursday afternoon was absolute chaos. 5 commentators on 5 different programs offered 5 conflicting angles on the Harry and Meghan mystery. Lady Colin Campbell claimed Harry was actually running from a federal inquiry. One royal broadcaster declared the Sussexes broke, while a tax advisor analyzed the calendar and called their timing absolutely immaculate. The former head of royal protection argued the official narrative beggars belief, while the very editor who broke the story admitted that nothing made total sense. Different voices, different backgrounds, entirely different theories. Yet, almost every single one of them circled back to the same detail, timing. Money, taxes, security, and immigration questions. Every single road pointed straight toward the calendar. Oddly enough, none of these experts seemed to buy the warm family reunion narrative that Harry and Meghan's camp was spinning. The cold, hard dates spoke far louder than any polished press statements ever could. It will likely be far harder for her. In complicated partnerships under the spotlight, the pressure historically falls heaviest on the woman. The looming question everyone will watch is how she behaves if she attends a formal royal event. Under strict protocol, She would have to curtsy to William and Catherine, a moment that would mark a massive turning point. After 6 long years of conflict, this latest chapter felt completely different. From Netflix specials to court battles, every previous clash had 2 competing sides, a simple he said, she said story. But this time, the narrative shifted. Critics were no longer debating if the latest story made sense. Instead, they fought over which alternative theory sounded the most plausible. Money, taxes, security, or visa trouble, everyone had a theory, and that sheer confusion became the headline itself. That is the consequence of spending years declaring absolutes on camera, only to suddenly rely on the exact opposite. Harry and Meghan spent years explaining why living in Britain was impossible, yet now it was suddenly their solution. They clearly wanted the public to forget their past statements, but the internet always keeps receipts. And when critics cannot even agree on what scheme to accuse them of, the situation stops being a scandal and becomes a full-blown puzzle. And complex puzzles, unfortunately for Meghan, do not sell jam. Meghan has wanted to secure her financial independence for a long time, meaning she will make use of every single opportunity left on her plate. It will leave the public believing the king is acting out of resentment over their deeply strained relationship. By continuing this pattern, they will only worsen the king's situation, a prospect many observers find completely devastating. There are growing fears that the stress could take a heavy toll on the health of both the king and Catherine, particularly if Meghan tries to force a superficial, friendly reunion. Many wonder how Catherine could possibly handle such a highly tense encounter. Typically, a man who simply misses his father would just book a flight. But Harry waited precisely for the tax calendar to click over. After nearly 6 full years, he suddenly had a fortnight to pack. That did not look like some emotional homecoming. It looked like a hard completion date. Lady Colin Campbell got the last word, and she made it count. She claimed the royal family strategy was simple: step back, let go, and hand the couple enough rope to hang themselves. A brutal picture, to say the least. Now, Harry and Meghan were allegedly returning without any of the grand conditions onlookers once anticipated. No public apology, no automatic security, and none of the demands they insisted on when they walked away. 6 years ago, they told everyone exactly why they had to leave. They spelled it out in interviews, on Netflix, in a memoir on a California couch with cameras rolling. But now, moving vans were reportedly booked and their bags were being packed. Yet, one massive question still hovered over the entire situation. After 6 years of explaining why they had to flee Britain, why can't they offer one convincing reason for why they suddenly need to return? The palace has simply had to manage a highly chaotic and difficult situation. And they certainly have not been following a traditional 12-step program. Anyone who knows anything about a 12-step recovery program understands that their approach has been to let go, trust God, and basically give the opposition enough rope to hang themselves. They will, and indeed, they seem to have done exactly that. Because here they are, returning with their tails between their legs. No security, no demands. And where is the apology? After all, they swore they would never return to the United Kingdom without a formal apology from the king, the Queen, and William. 9 different experts tried to explain this bizarre turn of events on Thursday, yet not one could offer a satisfying theory that made the entire story fit. Now, the couple is reportedly set to land in Britain by the end of the month. That very first snapshot of them back on British soil is bound to be absolute media gold. Perhaps that is the ultimate twist in this saga. After 6 years of explosive interviews, Netflix deals, memoirs, endless lawsuits, and West Coast reinvention, their most valuable asset now might actually be something incredibly simple. A single photograph proving they are back inside the royal orbit. No one bothered to ask the British public if they even wanted this circus back. Ready or not, the cameras are waiting, the headlines are locked, and every single move will be analyzed the second they land. Now, you and I have to ask, which explanation makes the most sense to you? The legal drama, the money problems, the security angle, or that suspiciously perfect tax calendar? Or is there an entirely different motive that everyone has missed? Share your verdict in the comments below. If you enjoyed this royal breakdown, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with fellow drama followers. Keep the debate going in the comments section. Let us know which theory sounds most realistic. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.